Good afternoon, Robert. What a pleasure to speak to you again.
Thank you, Eric. No, it's very nice to talk to you. It's one of those things when I've just been out for my daily constitutional, and I went and I thought, why am I in such a good mood? Oh, I'm going to chat to Erik. Because at the moment, well, like tomorrow, we know we're going to the post office. We're so excited. It's a day out.
Well, I guess we've spoken many times before, haven't we? But I think this is the first time that I've interviewed you rather than the other way around, isn't it?
So, it is, yeah.
Let's see how that goes, I suppose. But obviously, what it's about is our Electric Insight series. So it's just chatting to sort of key people in the world of electrification, just to share some views and understand how all that's going. And I guess we'd love to focus a little bit on Fully Charged and a bit of the story that goes around that and what's become really a bit of a global phenomenon, hasn't it, really?
It's so hard to know. I mean, it's certainly what we're very aware of at the moment in the last, say, 3 or 4 months is it's spawned, I think is the right word, a lot of YouTube channels about electric cars. Very recently, not 5 years ago it didn't, or 10 years ago, but very recently it has. But which is good, and there's a bit of competition there, and it's very healthy, and we know most of the people who are doing it. But it has certainly been a very long, slow process, but that has definitely recently experienced a very marked increase. And it's, in a sense, you could probably overlap a graph of views of Fully Charged with sales of electric cars, and they'd be very, very similar. You know, they're following a similar trajectory, so which is very good.
I think it's one of those many overnight successes that took 10 years of hard work behind the scenes, isn't it?
Exactly. That's why I think it doesn't feel like this sort of explosion of activity, because we've been doing it a long time. You know, and it's been, I suppose, the last sort of 3 or 4 years is when it's really kind of found its feet, and it's kind of grown very quickly. And in the lovely glory days when we could do live shows, I mean, that really kind of. It didn't only, I mean, that was a wonderful way for us to finance the actual channel, but it was also an incredible boost to the level of interest and the kind of confidence that we weren't shouting into a void, that there really was an actual proper audience that you could really judge. And even this year, last year now, in February last year, we did Fully Charged live in the USA, in Austin, Texas, and I was the most cynical about that. I was desperately worried that it would be an absolute
pretty much
disaster.
in oil central Texas.
Yeah,
as well,
yes,
you went straight for the oil heartland on that one.
Yes, we did. But I did know I'd been to Austin before, and I knew Austin was this kind of all the 3 cities in Texas, Denver, Houston, Austin, and another one I can't remember the name of. There's a kind of triangle of metrosexual hipsters. Because Austin is a big tech town, so actually a huge amount of electric cars, of charging networks, of electric public transport, of all, organic food, a lot of, it's very, very not redneck Texas, the actual town. Beautiful place, really lovely. So I kind of knew that, but I just thought, we don't know the American market well, we're going to get this all wrong. And it was sold out, it was packed out, it did really, really well. And the frustration, of course, is we can't do it again, but at the moment we will one day. But that has been a real joy to do those. And I guess from a personal point of view, it's that thing of, my background is live performing and then television. And that's a kind of combination of the two. And you go, this is, I've been standing on stages since the late 1970s in one form or another. And so that's sort of second nature to me. But the fact that it was about a topic I'm genuinely passionate about, that I'm fascinated with, that I find incredibly challenging and difficult to keep up with. I mean, the changes are so rapid and so enormous around the world. It's just dizzying, but it keeps me going. It's what gets me up in the morning.
Because the thing I find fascinating about your journey, Robert, is if I talk to different age groups about what you're known for. So for my age, you're Kryten from Red Dwarf.
Yeah.
But then I talk to the members of the team who are a little bit younger than me in Pod Point, and they say, "Who? Oh, Scrapheap Challenge." And so they all know you as the guy from Scrapheap Challenge. Yeah. And then you've done this magical third reinvention and become this sort of leading thought leader in the world of electrification and the environment. So I guess my question is, which one of those do you think that you're best defined by, I suppose? Which one are you best known by?
That's such a hard thing to know. What has been interesting in the last, say, 5 years and that's changed at the moment. But so. I have one or two friends who are properly famous in this country, that anyone would recognise. And if I've walked down the street with them, it's very, very noticeable. No one looks at me; they all look at them. It doesn't matter. And I've met one of them. I won't name him recently, and he said he's so happy because he goes shopping in supermarkets for the first time in 20 years because no one hassles him, because no one looks at him or wants to do a selfie or anything. And I have noticed that change, but the reason I'm saying this is because on the rare occasions when someone stops and says, "Oh, you're that guy, I love Red Dwarf," or whatever, that used to always be Red Dwarf. There was a period of time when it was Scrapheap, and what's interesting now is how often it is fully charged. I'm still surprised. Someone will come up and say, "Oh, can I have a selfie?" And I go, "Yeah, used to Red Dwarf or Scrapheap," and they go, "I love fully charged," and I always go, "Oh, really?" So I naturally assume no one will watch that because it's just on YouTube. And then that's a very big mistake. And in fact, what we now know is more people watch an episode of Fully Charged in the first week than used to watch Scrapheap or possibly Red Dwarf. It is because it's global. It's just a totally different thing. It's really odd.
And I think I read somewhere that 3/4 of your audience is outside the UK now as well, isn't it?
Yes, it is. It's about it's about 20. Last time we looked, 27% of our audience was UK, so the rest was outside. The biggest single one is United States, and then it's Germany. It's often Germany, then Australia and New Zealand. So it's that. But Germany much bigger than we'd have expected, and really interesting that we've got an audience there in a way.
And I guess, what was it? 600 episodes in, I think I'm right in saying, aren't I? Is that about where you are?
I think it might be.
What was your view when you kicked this off? Because I guess, we first spoke when Fully Charged was very much in its infancy, wasn't it? Did you have a view of where this was going? Or is it a complete surprise? Or how did it all pan out? Really?
Absolutely not. I mean, I think so where it came from was very much so, I did a Scrapheap Challenge for 10 years, and 4 of those years were... 2 of those years, the whole series was made in the United States, in California, and 2 of those years, I went back to California for 6 weeks or so to shoot episodes of Junkyard Wars, which is the American version of the show, exactly the same format, identical format, but an American version. And in that time, I met a lot of engineers. You just naturally did on that show. You meet a lot of engineers from all walks of life and all areas. But a lot of people, I kept meeting these people who were working on electric transmission systems. And you go, it just didn't make sense then. What do you mean? Well, like for a train? No, for cars. What? And battery management. Oh, yeah, he's in battery management software. What is that? There was no language for it. There was no understanding of it. That kind of got me thinking. And I did have a ride in this car called the T0 in, I think it was 2001. I think that was 2001. On a drag strip when we were filming nearby. And I mean, that was a remarkable experience, but it still wasn't me. It didn't go, oh, right, electric cars, that's the answer. I went, oh, it's not very interesting. It doesn't make lots of noise like a dragster, or a Ferrari or a muscle car. It just went, but it went very, very, very fast. I was impressed with the acceleration. That's the first time I experienced anything like that. And that it definitely planted a seed, but it didn't. What I think is amazing looking back is it didn't flourish. It was a very slow growing seed for probably 8 or 9 years. And then you just started to hear more and more about hybrids and fuel efficiency. And then I learned, particularly being in California, about the California Air Resource Board. Really pivotal role in my growth of my understanding was, children who go to school near a big freeway in Los Angeles do live less long and don't do as well academically as children who go to the posh school up in the hills that's expensive, that's nowhere near a freeway. It's that, and it's a brutal differentiation. And the California Air Resource Board had that down, and they're the ones effectively who busted Volkswagen. All the European testing people went, no, it is good, it is clean, the diesel is clean.
and I guess also really the first people to start putting quotas on things, weren't they, going back a long time, so to encourage the right vehicle behaviour. Exactly.
They had a huge influence on what we now are seeing all around the world in terms of electric vehicles. I mean, I don't think Tesla would have been started had it not. So everybody goes, Tesla were the first. Yeah, but they wouldn't have done it without a government body saying, hang on a minute, the fumes coming out of all these cars are killing old people and stunting children. Let's not have as many fumes. And I mean, I don't know if you, I mean, I spent a lot of time in Los Angeles, not necessarily willingly. It's not my favorite American city. But one thing you're very aware of if you're there is cars. It's definitely a car city, and there's so many of them, and they were so, the first time I went was in the mid 1980s. Those cars were so supremely fuel inefficient. It's like they were designed deliberately to consume as much fossil fuel per mile as it was possible to do. So they really did have a problem, and it was very noticeable.
So I guess one of the things I always originally sort of attributed to yourself and Fully Charged was the fact that you really sort of came at it as asking the questions that the person who didn't understand the sector would go and ask, and really sort of appeal to the person who wasn't a deep technical person in this sector but really wanted to get into it. I guess the irony now, after 10 years, is you're probably the most educated person on all manners of electric vehicles globally that I could ever dream of speaking to. How do you manage to work those two things?
Really
You've seen all of it now,
yes.
right?
No, I mean, it is true. I mean, there's the two things one thing I learned on doing Scrapheap, which is very relevant to this, and then there's another bit. The one thing I learned is that being stupid, no, I don't mean stupid, being ignorant is a great advantage in that role. So and there were occasions where we would stop shooting because someone had said we're taking the clutch out, we're going to have direct drive. I knew what that meant. Yeah. So I didn't ask anything about it because I did understand it. Or we're using a 2-cylinder engine because we can't get... there's certain aspects of engineering and of mechanics and of engines that I got. So you then don't ask, well, why are you doing that? Or how do you do that? Or what's a clutch? Which is what the show needed. The show needed so that it could then have a drawing of this is a clutch and there's two plates and one's spinning and one isn't. Well, that one pushes against that and then they both spin. That simple explanation of it. And so therefore... I then cultivated deliberate ignorance, which is quite easy to do.
But also, I think it's a massive skill, isn't it? Because you've got to dynamically, whilst you're interviewing, presenting, doing all these other things, with 10 years of deep knowledge of a sector, also pick yourself up on when have I sort of moved into things that the viewer won't be able to understand, or that I should suddenly understand, because you could easily lose your train and get out of that. But it must be a real skill that you've developed. I guess I hadn't really thought that started back at Scrapheap Challenge days, but I guess it clearly does now. You've mentioned
I mean, it took me a while to kind of remember those, and also I'm now working with one of the producers of Scrapheap who's reminded me of that. He said, "You've managed to remain professionally stupid for 20 years." Congratulations, going, all right, fair enough.
I think all of your viewers thank you for doing so.
But I mean, I think the thing is, then you do. That's the in a sense the other failing I have is my memory. So people go, oh, when you drove the diddly-do, electric car X, and I'm going, oh yeah. I can't remember it. I have to watch it. I have to find that episode on YouTube and watch it. Oh yeah, I do remember it now.
Remind yourself of your own opinion.
Yeah, which is that is so embarrassing. I mean, that's an age thing. But I mean, I think the thing that excites me, not only it certainly was very much inspired when we've spoken in the past, is that big picture, which I definitely don't have an expertise about, but I have an enthusiasm and a fascination for. So the kind of the energy transition, for want of a better term, the way that, the fact that you can make electricity from a solar panel is incredibly mundane, but what that actually means in societal terms, in economic terms, in the way we treat the environment, all those things is really big. It's a massive shift. The fact that we can generate electricity from a thing spinning round up on a post is remarkable. The fact that you can drive a car and not burn anything is remarkable,
Although Fully Charged, when mentioned, sort of brings up pictures of electric vehicles, the truth is it's a channel about energy transition as much as it's about electric vehicles, isn't it?
If anything, the cars are the sort of, I don't know what the terms are. There's lots of terms. That's the kind of come and look at the cars. And I think the cars are vitally important, but actually my personal focus is definitely on the big picture of the energy transition and what that means. And I mean, that in a sense, there's a very big side of me, which I can really sense is growing, of people realizing that private car ownership is not a terribly good, sustainable model. And I mean, that's coming, my generation, that's quite tough, because we grew up, absolutely, that was a paramount thing. It was a kind of part of your journey to adulthood, was you got your own car. That was a big deal. When I had my first Morris 1000 van, I was cool in my own small world. There was a lot of people thought I was an idiot, but
So I guess one of the things that always fascinates me is when we look back at, we've just gone through a sort of decade transition, haven't we? But when we look back at the end of 2020, beginning of 2030, if you like, and say, where are we on our journey for low carbon at the moment? How do you respond to that? Where do you think we are? What the phase that we're living in now, how will it be remembered in the future?
I mean, most positive... The most positive spin on that is that it was the time when we really understood that it was a problem. I don't think we've done anything. I think, if you look back at it historically, they hadn't done anything in 2020, but they got it. That might be the case, that we've got it. And that I feel the general opinion of people, and it might be reluctant, it might be enthusiastic, or it might be resigned, but is, okay, there is a problem. We've got to stop burning this much stuff. We have to change the way we do these things. We do need renewables. We do need electricity storage, electric vehicles, But, the whole thing goes on and on and on. And we need to do it incredibly fast. And I mean, that was a fascinating couple of discussions I've had recently with people in their 20s who are enthusiastic car share users. And they don't. And I said, so would you not consider buying a car? And they both laughed. And they went, why would you buy a car? It's a bloody stupid thing to do. And they both asked me, where's your car? And I said, well, it's parked the other side of that wall behind me. And they went, exactly. What's it doing? Nothing. And you're paying for that. He said, I used a car this morning. I'm not paying for it now. And that, I think, gives me a sort of modicum of hope. Well, now, both of those were highly well-educated European engineers, so there is but the fact that is starting to, that's my hope, in the sense that the next generation don't go, I want to own a car. I'll own a bike, because that's quite nice, but I'll just rent cars when I need them, which would be great. That would make it. I think, I can't remember whether I was at a conference years ago where, I think it might be in the Cheltenham Science Festival. It was one of those where someone had worked out how many cars we'd need on the roads, so that everyone had exactly the same access to cars as they have now, but they didn't own them. And it was about an 80% decrease in the number of cars we needed. And we could all still use cars exactly as we do today. Wouldn't make any difference.
It's certainly part of a speech that I regularly do, which says, we think of the car as a mobile object because it's on the move when we're sat in it, but it is in fact a static object for 97% of its life. So.
Taking up space in our cities, I mean, it's crazy,
So to give us a bit of... so I think I would probably agree with the points you made there. When we look back in 10 years' time, now will be the time that the energy transition became accepted as happening and has to happen, isn't it? And I really feel, as I sort of, as I'm sure you do, navigate the world of electric vehicles particularly, the naysayers and the deniers are now beginning to be significantly outweighed by the people saying this is factual and has to be addressed. And that in itself is a fundamental change which leads to eventually it happening, right? Because once everyone accepts it, you can move into an implementation phase. But it's certainly been fascinating alongside Fully Charged for most of 10 years, working in the phase before it became generally accepted and perhaps being an outspoken and unusual voice in, we think this might be the future.
Yeah. And I mean, I think those things like, just the general attitude. And I mean, even in my attitude, so I will get a comment or a message or a tweet or whatever from someone who goes, electric cars just aren't ready yet, and I'll stick with my diesel. And there would have been a time where I'd have gone, well, it might be worth considering the externalities of a diesel, blah, blah, blah. Now I go, that's fine. It's absolutely fine. You stick with your diesel, because any of our individual decisions around land transportation are utterly irrelevant, because electric cars are coming. I've now, it's not a confidence, it's just knowledge. What are the majority of cars going to be in 15 years' time? They're going to be electric. and the majority of vehicles as well. I think that's a really critical thing. You just now the amount of reports that articles and stuff. There, 5 years ago it would be a company in Wales have bought 3 electric vans for delivery, and you go, that's news. Now it is Amazon have just accepted their 1,000th van from one distribution. It's 100% electric. They charge them there. They've got vehicle-to-grid systems. They've got solar on the roof. It's not 1 or 2 vans. It's 1,000. And in America, it's 100,000. Amazon have just ordered. So that scale of stuff is no point having an argument about whether diesel, my clean diesel, is just, those arguments are now just pointless.
Yeah, we've gone from, I refer to it as a bit like a snowball, isn't it? And first with a snowball, you have to sort of push it, and then eventually it gets enough momentum and it starts to roll down the hill on its own, and then eventually you have to run to keep up with the thing. And I think we're just, as a society, at the point where we just need to start running to keep up with this sort of energy transition snowball, which is now gathering sufficient momentum that it's happening whatever.
Well, it is that classic thing of like, one company will have 20 electric vans, and everyone will 5 years ago, and everyone go, what are they doing? That must be so difficult. They don't have the range, and then they'll hear somewhere what their fuel bill is, and they'll go, because that's we think of it on individual levels. I paid 80 quid to fill my tank. Well, you fill 5,000 tanks. For your van fleet, and you've got the spreadsheet in front of you, and then you fill 5,000 batteries, and you go, I have saved £750,000 this quarter. It's that kind of level of economic change, and that's going to. I know that will fluctuate with road pricing and all those things, and insurance and whatever. But there's no way. A kilowatt hour of energy in a liquid fuel is used so inefficiently in a combustion engine. You just go, what's the point? What is the point? It's never going to make economic sense from now on. And the most recent reports, I've just been reading 2 confusing reports from Bloomberg New Energy Finance. One was we finally reached $100 a kilowatt hour to produce a battery. And the other one was we finally passed. It's now under $100. So I don't know which one, but we're clearly the price of building a battery is hovering around $100, which is the kind of everyone has said for a long time the critical sort of point where an electric vehicle costs the same to make as a petrol one.
Yes, and we spoke about it numerous times, haven't we?
Yeah.
This is sort of price parity of the 300-mile range electric vehicle, and you do the maths back, and it comes out at $100 a kilowatt hour-ish. We can get into pack cost and sell cost, but we probably don't need to. But about there, and the answer is we're there or thereabout now.
Yeah.
That technology will be in the consumer's hands in the next couple of years, I think. Yeah. So it's very much an exciting thing. I guess we've moved there slightly. We've moved from talking about what you said was what we'll be remembered for, which was almost a societal change, wasn't it? And then we touched on an economic change. But what are the technologies in the last year? I mean, you've been and interviewed, touched, play with every technology in the decarbonising space over the last 12 months. What's really stood out and appealed to you in the last 12 months?
I mean, I think it is certainly because it's in such early days still, but the notion of vehicle-to-grid technology, and I am still not. I'm very open-minded to discover it's not the silver bullet or whatever. It's not the solution, but you can't help but think. There's one example I've just seen recently, which is school buses in the United States. So, we think of it, I've got a vehicle-to-grid unit here in my house, and it's kind of, at the moment, I can't use it because I haven't got the car that works with it. So it's very sort of teething level entry point. And you could then go, well, I could run the house off that. That does make sense, and particularly, I've got a very flexible tariff. So if I can not use power from the grid from kind of this time in the day until, from say 4 o'clock in the afternoon till 9 in the evening, that's a huge cost advantage to me. So if you could use your car to do that rather than have batteries fitted, big plus. But what you then see is once it becomes at grid level, at mass level or at fleet level. So you've got 1,000 trucks that aren't being used that are all plugged into a vehicle to grid, and the grid can, if it needs to, at peak time, take 10 kilowatt hours from each of those trucks. You've got a power station. You've got a large gas turbine power station, peaker plant that costs billions to build, and it's not running for 99% of its time. You know, that stuff you can't. Well, if I'm hoping that will work, and it's the kind of complexities of it at the moment, and the expense of the units, the actual the electronics that you need to do that, and of course, not all cars are built with that capability inside them. So it's not going to happen overnight, but you can imagine the advantages and the software that's used to run those systems is going to be very critical. And I don't know whether there's 32 million private vehicles on the roads of the UK now, which is crazy. But if you had 20 million, so you had far less privately owned vehicles and far more car sharing, but you had 20 million, and 10 million of those were plugged into a vehicle to grid. That is about 5 Hinkley Point Cs in the touch of a button, a click of a mouse, and you've got an enormous supply of power. And you're only taking 1 kilowatt hour from each car, but that's 10 million kilowatt hours, which I know you're very good at maths, Erik. But it's a lot.
It's always been. I've got a nuanced view on vehicle to grid, but the concept of you're aggregating up large amounts of controllable loads, and whether they're one-way controllable or two-way controllable, that's a fundamental enabler, in my view, of the decarbonising into the future, isn't it? This concept of smart grid, which is batted around, but means a massive range of different things, of which vehicle to grid is of course one of them. Yeah,
but I mean, I suppose you're right though. Equally, the other way around, which is the thing. These are the things I had no notion of before I had an electric car. And everyone I've spoken to who's got an electric car learns this very quickly, that the price of electricity isn't static. It goes up and down. And once you've learnt that, you go, I never knew that. I just had lights, and turn a light on and you turn it off. I don't know, and it costs money. But, I had zero understanding of that. And now I'm supremely aware of it, and I'm very conscious of the wholesale price of electricity. And now there are tariffs, like the one I'm on, is tied to the wholesale price. So I've only just finally got it running properly now. So in fact, as always, I'm an early adopter. I had one of their first 3-phase meters. Everything, it's not all my fault for once, but it's not their fault either. It was just early days. But now, there will be times where I can charge my car at night and be paid to do it, which is still strikes me as utterly bonkers. And I'm sure, in the grand scheme of things, a temporary measure as we, work out how to do all this. But it is extraordinary that is remotely possible.
And I think it brings on to another great point, which is you've always been absolutely willing to be at the leading edge of this in your personal life as well, haven't you? As you say, sometimes that works out and sometimes not. But be fascinated to understand what the setup is at home now, Robert. What have you got in your...
So, I'm nearly there. So I was delayed in the last year for very obvious reasons. But it's basically and my family have now accepted this. So one of the joys of working for the BBC in the 80s and 90s, as I did, was occasionally you'll get a repeat fee. Now, that's a royalty check for Red Dwarf, because it's been sold somewhere. And they vary in size from, literally some pennies. I've had a repeat fee of like 9p. But up to a substantial amount of money. So I did have one last year. So I finally got rid of... We had a very old gas cooker. And I got rid of that, and I've got an electric one. So we're now 100% electric, except for heating. And it's this... So that's the other thing. The big elephant that's sleeping in the room in 2020 is domestic heating.
Yes.
And we still have a gas boiler. So we're not on mains gas where we live. We've got LPG boiler. And it's like, it grinds with me. It's like grit in my eye. I am desperate to get rid of it. So we're in the process of fitting in heat batteries and an electric boiler. So because I don't want to rip out the entire heating system, but you can keep a wet heating system, as I have, with an electric boiler. And it's more expensive than gas still at the moment. But I'm sort of mitigating that with smart grid usage. When you have you might have your heating on at slightly different times of the day than you would with gas. But
are we talking about air source heat pumps? Is that where
well,
you're going?
I haven't done air source heat pumps. So there's a friend of mine down the road, lives near me, has ground source heat pump, but not the hose pipe buried under your lawn, but straight down. So and he's a retired mining oil engineer, oil drilling. So he really knows his geology and how to drill. So he has drilled a comically deep shaft for his geothermal, and he has a huge problem dissipating all the heat. So he's actually built himself a hot tub which has running hot water into it that then flows away because there's so much heat. He's got to get rid of it. So he heats his whole house, which is unbearably hot, and uses he's built a little. He's an engineer that's a bit of a nutter. He's done all his own stuff. So he's got a little steam generator that generates electricity. He's had to have a 3-phase supply point. It's cost him unimaginable amounts of money. But it is possible. But that strikes me as the stuff we've seen, like in a housing estate in Wales we went to see last year. They do a geothermal borehole for 3 houses, and that heats 3 houses. And when you look at the amount of electricity the pump uses, that pumps the brine round there and heats their homes, it's in the pennies a month per house. Their heating bills, their whole plan was that no house there would ever spend more than £10 a month on a single figure monthly heating and lighting forever. That's the whole plan. But those houses are built really from the ground up to utilise that technology, which is retrofitting, as we know, is
I think it's almost
option.
Complete repeat of the electric vehicle experience to a certain extent.
It's really close. It's so close to that. You're absolutely right. Yeah.
We've got the air source heat pumps, which are perhaps a little bit on the expensive side today because they're pretty low volume. We've got some challenges in retrofitting that technology in an electric vehicle. Was a internal combustion engine chassis with an electric bit tagged on. Didn't work as well as a completely redesigned electric vehicle. And I think the same going on here, isn't it? So I think we've got the right direction of travel. When you design the house with the insulation and the setup and the right size radiators and underfloor and all the rest of it, you can make that. It's not far off that.